February 19th, 1945. Sergeant Takashi Watanabe crouches in the entrance of pillbox 217 on Iwo Jima's northern sector, his hands trembling as he adjusts the sights on his Type 92 heavy machine gun. Through the narrow firing slit, he watches another American Sherman tank lumber across the volcanic ash, its olive-drab paint scarred from 3 days of relentless combat. The morning air carries the sulfuric stench of the island mixed with cordite and death. At 32 years old, this veteran of Manchuria and Guadalcanal has learned to identify American armor by sound alone. The distinctive rumble of a Sherman's engine, the grinding of its tracks through volcanic sand, the mechanical whine of its turret traverse. He has trained his squad to target weak points, to wait until the tanks close within killing range of the Type 4 anti-tank mines his engineers have buried along the approach routes. But as this Sherman closes to 200 yards, something in its movement pattern makes Watanabe's stomach tighten. The tank isn't following the standard American tactical doctrine he's observed for months. It's moving with deliberate caution, positioning itself at an angle that offers maximum protection to its frontal armor while maintaining a clear line of sight to his pillbox. The turret begins to traverse toward his position, and that's when he sees it. Where the familiar 75mm main gun should protrude, there's something different. A modified barrel. A nozzle that doesn't match any tank cannon in Japanese intelligence reports. His radioman, Private Koji Nakamura, whispers from the darkness behind him. "Sergeant, that tank. It looks wrong. The weapon." Watanabe has spent 18 months helping to build this fortress. His pillbox features 4 feet of reinforced concrete walls capable of withstanding direct hits from battleship guns, steel doors salvaged from demolished buildings, interlocking fields of fire with neighboring positions. Below his feet, tunnels connect to General Kuribayashi's underground network, 11 miles of passages carved through volcanic rock, deep enough to survive anything the Americans can throw at the island. The general's orders are explicit and mathematically brutal. Do not die until you have killed 10 Americans. Every soldier will maintain his position until overrun. The mathematics are simple. 21,000 defenders multiplied by 10 American casualties each equals 210,000 enemy losses, more than the entire invasion force. The cost will be so catastrophic that America will abandon its plans to invade the Japanese homeland. Watanabe has committed himself to these calculations. His wife in Osaka received his final letter 3 weeks ago, carefully written words explaining why he would never return home. He has made peace with death, but as the Sherman closes to 150 yards, the sound that erupts from the American tank transforms everything he understands about warfare. Not the thunder crack of a cannon, not the chattering of machine guns, but something entirely new. A mechanical hiss like compressed air escaping under enormous pressure, followed by a sight that will haunt the survivors of this battle for the rest of their lives. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. A torrent of burning liquid erupts from the American tank, arcing through the Pacific morning like a river of hellfire. The stream stretches impossibly far, over 100 yards of napalm-thickened death, painting a blazing line across the volcanic landscape. It strikes pillbox 223 to Watanabe's left with devastating accuracy, splashing through the machine gun port and flowing inside like molten lava seeking the lowest ground. The screams last only seconds. Watanabe's radio crackles with panicked reports from positions across the sector. "Strange American weapon. They're burning us out." His hands shake as he watches black smoke pour from defensive positions that were designed to withstand the heaviest bombardment in history. The underground fortress that was supposed to be impregnable has become a death trap. To understand the terror that paralyzes Sergeant Watanabe in this moment, you need to grasp what Japanese defenders believed about their defensive system and what American innovation is about to destroy. For an entire year, 21,000 Japanese soldiers and Korean laborers have transformed Iwo Jima into the most heavily fortified 8 square miles in military history. General Takashi Kuribayashi has abandoned traditional Japanese beach defense doctrine, studying American amphibious tactics at Tarawa and Saipan, learning from every Japanese defeat. His defensive philosophy represents a radical departure from centuries of samurai tradition. No banzai charges. No wasteful deaths for honor. Instead, cold mathematical precision designed to make every American yard cost rivers of blood. The numbers supporting this strategy are staggering. 1,500 fortified positions connected by tunnels large enough to shelter entire battalions. Artillery pieces pre-registered on every possible landing beach. Concrete bunkers with walls thick enough to withstand 16-inch naval shells. Every defensive position features interlocking fields of fire with at least 2 neighboring bunkers, creating kill zones where American Marines will be caught in crossfire from multiple directions. But the real genius of Kuribayashi's design lies underground. 11 miles of tunnels, 7 stories deep in places, connecting every major defensive position. Hospital rooms carved from volcanic rock, ammunition storage chambers, living quarters with ventilation shafts, water storage tanks, an entire subterranean city designed to survive the heaviest bombardment and allow defenders to reposition without exposing themselves to American fire. Japanese intelligence has analyzed every American weapon system used in the Pacific Campaign. Reports detail the effective range of portable flamethrowers, approximately 45 yards for the improved models carrying napalm. Training manuals emphasize anti-flamethrower tactics, target the distinctive fuel tanks on the operator's back, rush positions during the weapon's minimum range, exploit the operator's vulnerability while reloading. Wait for the characteristic black smoke that marks a flamethrower's position, then concentrate mortar fire on that location. These tactics have been refined through bitter experience at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu. Japanese defenders have learned that American flamethrower operators suffer casualty rates exceeding 90% in some units. The weapons are devastating at close range, but require their operators to approach within yards of fortified positions, exposing themselves to concentrated fire. Every Japanese defensive position on Iwo Jima has been designed with this understanding. The bunkers feature firing ports positioned to create zones where flamethrower operators must advance across open ground to reach effective range. Machine gun positions are registered to target the most likely approaches for flamethrower teams. But all Japanese planning assumes flamethrowers will be carried by infantry. The concept of armored flamethrowers, tanks that can approach fortified positions under cover of their own armor while delivering accurate incendiary attacks at unprecedented range, has never been seriously considered. 5 months earlier, the story of this weapon began in a classified workshop at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, where the sound of welding torches filled the tropical air 20 hours a day. Navy Construction Battalion personnel, Seabees, worked in rotating shifts, driven by a desperate need to save Marine lives in the battles. Yet to come. Machinists mate First Class A. Riker wipes sweat from his forehead as he examines the CBH-1 flamethrower system taking shape inside the turret of Sherman Tank No. 431. The modified 75mm gun mount houses a weapon that looks nothing like conventional tank armament. Every bunker this thing burns out is a bunker our boys don't have to die taking, Riker tells his partner. Electricians mate Second Class Joseph Kissel, as sparks cascade around them in the dim workshop. Reports from Peleliu and Saipan tell a heartbreaking story. Marines died by the thousands trying to assault fortified positions that artillery couldn't touch and naval gunfire couldn't penetrate. Portable flamethrower operators have casualty rates exceeding 70%. Some units lose 92% of their flame operators in a single engagement. Boys with 70-pound fuel tanks on their backs approaching concrete bunkers at ranges where Japanese machine gunners can see the whites of their eyes. The mathematics are brutal and undeniable. Colonel George Unmucked paces between 8 tanks taking shape in the warehouse, each conversion requiring 1,100 man-hours and 150 specially machined parts. At 64 years old, with 44 years of military service, he understands that wars are won by innovation, not just courage. His CBH-1 system combines the best elements from British, American, and captured German flamethrower designs into something unprecedented. A weapon that can project napalm-thickened fuel at ranges exceeding 150 yards with the accuracy of a tank cannon. 300 pounds per square inch of pressure, Unmacht explains to a visiting Marine officer, his voice carrying the confidence of an engineer who has run the calculations 100 times, triple the pressure of previous designs. The fuel mixture burns at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. The flame can traverse 270 degrees and elevate from -10 to +35 degrees through the tank's existing fire control systems. But the real innovation is psychological as much as technological. These tanks look identical to regular Shermans until the moment they open fire. No special markings, no indication of their terrible purpose. To Japanese observers trained to identify American armor types, they appear ordinary until it's too late. The technical specifications tell part of the story. Each CBH-1 system carries 300 gallons of fuel mixture, primarily napalm, thickened with aluminum soaps to create a gel that sticks to surfaces and burns with horrifying persistence. The pressurization system uses compressed nitrogen rather than air, eliminating the risk of explosive combustion inside the tank. The flame gun itself features 2 nozzle sizes, allowing crews to adjust between maximum range and maximum volume, depending on tactical requirements. With the half-inch nozzle, the weapon can fire continuously for 80 seconds before exhausting its fuel supply. The 3/4-inch nozzle reduces firing time to 56 seconds, but delivers nearly twice the volume of burning gel per second, creating an overwhelming wave of fire that can clear large fortifications. The entire system integrates seamlessly with the Sherman's existing fire control mechanisms, allowing gunners trained on conventional tank cannons to operate the flamethrower with minimal additional instruction. Meanwhile, 8,000 miles away, General Kuribayashi stands in his command bunker beneath Hill 382, studying maps marked with precise defensive calculations. Every approach route has been measured, every kill zone registered with artillery spotters. His 21,000 defenders represent the culmination of everything Japanese military doctrine has learned about defending against American amphibious assault. The numbers supporting his defensive strategy are elegant in their brutality. If every defender kills 10 Americans before dying, if the underground fortress forces the enemy to fight for every yard, if Japanese resistance remains fanatical enough, the psychological impact on American public opinion could be decisive. Make them pay such a horrific cost that invasion of the Japanese homeland becomes politically impossible. Japanese intelligence estimates suggest American casualties could reach 50% of the invasion force if defenders maintain their positions and execute their missions with discipline. These projections are based on carefully analyzed data from previous battles. At Tarawa, American casualties exceeded 30% for an island 1/10 the size of Iwo Jima. At Peleliu, the battle lasted 2 months longer than American planners predicted, with casualty rates that shocked military commanders. Kuribayashi has studied these battles with the analytical precision of an engineer. He understands that American firepower superiority means Japanese forces cannot win through conventional tactics. But American public opinion represents a vulnerability that mathematical precision can exploit. Private Hiroshi Tanaka crouches in a spider hole near the base of Mount Suribachi, a 20-kilogram bomb strapped to his back. At 19, this farmer's son from Hiroshima Prefecture has volunteered for the ultimate mission: infiltrate enemy tank positions at night and detonate himself against American armor. His training has been thorough and specific. American Sherman tanks feature thin armor on their rear deck, above the engine compartment. A magnetic charge placed correctly can penetrate this weak point, causing catastrophic damage to the power plant and potentially igniting ammunition storage. The tactical manual describes approach routes, blind spots where a determined soldier can close with enemy armor undetected in darkness. Tanaka has written his final letter home, careful phrases explaining to his parents why their only son will not return from the war. He has made peace with death, embracing the warrior tradition that values honor above survival. But his training assumes he will face conventional American tanks. Nothing in his tactical manual covers tanks that can fire liquid death at ranges exceeding 100 yards. Weapons that turn defensive advantages into killing grounds before suicide attackers can approach within striking distance. Staff Sergeant Robert Mesa checks his watch as Tank 431 idles near Iwo Jima's black sand beaches. Around him, The 8 M4A3R3 flamethrower tanks sit among regular Shermans, their terrible secret hidden until the moment of engagement. His crew represents months of specialized training on equipment that's never been tested in combat. Driver: Private James Morrison. Assistant Driver: Private Robert Chen. Loader: Corporal Anthony Vitelli. Gunner: Corporal Thomas Carlson. 5 men whose coordination will determine whether this experimental weapon succeeds or fails. Remember, Mesa tells his crew over the intercom, surprise is our only advantage. We look like every other Sherman until we fire. After that, every Japanese gun on this island will be aimed at us. Through his periscope, he can see Marines dying by the hundreds trying to advance against invisible Japanese positions. The first day's casualties are staggering. 2,400 Marines killed or wounded for less than 700 yards of territory gained. Conventional tactics are failing catastrophically. Naval gunfire can't penetrate bunkers buried under 10 feet of volcanic rock. Artillery shells explode harmlessly against positions designed to withstand direct hits from battleship guns. The volcanic ash is too soft to support sustained artillery fire, causing guns to sink and lose accuracy after a few salvos. The terrain features steep ravines and rocky outcroppings that provide Japanese defenders with perfect positions to ambush advancing Marines. Every yard costs blood, and the mathematics suggest this battle could last months if something doesn't change the equation. But what if 8 tanks could transform the tactical situation? What if a weapon exists that can neutralize Japanese defensive advantages, turning underground fortresses into crematoriums? At exactly 1420 hours on February 20th, 1945, the sound that will echo through military history forever breaks the volcanic silence of Iwo Jima's northern sector. Inside Tank 431, Staff Sergeant Mesa's voice cuts through the engine noise with mechanical precision. Gunner, flamethrower, pillbox, fire. Corporal Thomas Carlson's finger finds the trigger, and the CBH-1 system erupts with a sound witnesses will later describe as the devil's own blowtorch. The compressed nitrogen system, operating at 300 pounds per square inch, propels a stream of napalm-thickened fuel oil in a perfect arc through the Pacific morning. The burning liquid strikes the concrete pillbox aperture with devastating accuracy, splashing through the machine gun port and flowing inside like molten lava seeking every corner, every hiding place. Sergeant Watanabe watches in paralyzed horror from his observation position 200 yards away. The temperature inside the neighboring bunker soars past 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. The oxygen is consumed so rapidly that Japanese soldiers suffocate before the flames reach them. Those who attempt to flee through rear exits discover that liquid fire has flowed through ventilation shafts, blocking escape routes and turning their carefully constructed fortress into a crematorium. "My God," whispers Private Morrison, the tank's driver, as screams cut through the morning air. Brief, terrible sounds that end almost as quickly as they begin. But there's no time for reflection. Japanese anti-tank guns have identified the threat. A 47mm shell strikes Tank 431's frontal armor with a sound like the world's largest hammer hitting an anvil. The tank shudders, steel ringing against steel, but the shot ricochets skyward. The Sherman's armor holds. "Traverse right 30 degrees, Mesa orders, his voice steady despite chaos erupting around them. Second target, continuous fire. Carlson triggers another burst, maintaining the flame for 15 agonizing seconds until black smoke billows from every aperture of another fortification. Through the smoke and sulfur fumes, they can see something unprecedented. Japanese soldiers emerging from positions not in organized retreat, but in panicked flight. Men who have been trained from childhood that death before dishonor is the warrior's only choice, are running from the threat of burning alive. Marine riflemen, positioned to exploit exactly this moment, are so surprised they initially fail to fire on the retreating enemy. "They're running," Chen reports from his position at the bow machine gun. Disbelief clear in his voice. "They're actually running away." Radio chatter explodes across Marine communications networks as reports flood in from across the front. Flame tanks operational. Japanese positions neutralized. Enemy abandoning fortifications without direct assault. Request immediate flame tank support becomes the most common transmission on battalion tactical frequencies. Tank number 434, supporting the 23rd Marines near the East Boat Basin, has developed what Crew Commander Sergeant William Patterson calls corkscrew and burn tactics, approaching in a spiral pattern to avoid anti-tank fire while maintaining continuous flame suppression. In one afternoon, his tank destroys 4 fortified positions that had stopped an entire battalion's advance for 2 days. But it's Tank 432's demonstration near Mount Suribachi that reveals the weapon's true psychological impact. Patterson orders his driver to stop 100 yards from a complex of interconnected caves where dozens of Japanese soldiers watch from the darkness. Through his periscope, Patterson can see their eyes reflecting like animals caught in headlights. He triggers a short burst of flame into the air, not at enemy positions but skyward, as a demonstration of what could happen. The effect is instantaneous and unprecedented. Japanese soldiers begin fleeing from rear exits, abandoning positions they've been ordered to defend to the death. These are men who have survived the Sino-Japanese War, who have been trained in the warrior tradition that values death over surrender, yet they're running from the threat of burning alive. The underground fortress that General Kuribayashi designed to be impregnable has become a psychological nightmare, where concrete walls and steel doors offer no protection against liquid fire that flows like water and burns like fury itself. Private Tanaka, crouched in his spider hole with the suicide bomb strapped to his back, watches Tank 437 approach, his position. His tactical manual has prepared him for this moment. Wait for the tank to close within 10 meters, then rush forward with the explosive charge. Simple mathematics. 1 Japanese life for 1 American tank, but as the Sherman closes to 50 meters, something impossible happens. The turret traverses toward a bunker 80 yards to Tanaka's left, and liquid fire erupts from where the main gun should be. The napalm stream arcs through the air like a flaming river, striking the bunker and flowing through every opening. The screams that follow are unlike anything in his experience, not the quick death of bullets or shrapnel, but the prolonged agony of men being burned alive in their own fortress. The flame is dark with black smoke. He will later write in his journal if he survives. I could not see even an inch ahead. The enemy must have been angry. Tank 437 closes within 30 meters. Close enough that Tanaka can see the crew commander's periscope tracking back and forth, searching for targets. This is his moment. The distance his training manual specified for a successful suicide attack, but as he prepares to rise from his concealment, the tank's turret swings 180 degrees and fires directly behind itself, incinerating a squad of Japanese soldiers who were attempting their own suicide charge. The tactical revolution is complete. Unlike conventional tanks that can only fire forward, the CBH-1's full traverse capability allows it to engage targets in any direction. The weapon that was supposed to have limited fields of fire can now create a complete circle of death around itself. Tanaka remains frozen in his spider hole as the tank passes overhead, the weight of 35 tons compressing the volcanic ash around his hiding place. Through the ground, he can feel the vibrations of the Sherman's tracks, the rumble of its engine, the mechanical sounds of a machine that has just redefined warfare. There are strange things and miracles in the world, he writes later. It is a miracle that I am now writing such things at a time like this. By nightfall on February 20th, the numbers tell a story that will reshape Marine Corps doctrine forever. 47 fortified positions destroyed by 8 tanks in one day. Marine casualties in flame-supported sectors down 40% from the previous day. 600 yards of territory gained in areas that had been static for 48 hours. But the most significant statistic is psychological. For the first time in Japanese military history, significant numbers of soldiers are abandoning positions rather than dying at their posts. General Kuribayashi, monitoring the battle from his command bunker deep beneath Hill 382, receives reports that shatter his carefully calculated defensive mathematics. Positions that were designed to hold for weeks are falling in hours. The underground fortress that was supposed to be impregnable has become a death trap, with liquid fire flowing through ventilation shafts and tunnel connections like molten rivers seeking the lowest ground. His emergency orders that night designate flame tanks as priority targets for all available 47mm anti-tank guns. Special assault teams are organized, volunteers who will attack with explosive charges strapped to their bodies. But the fundamental problem remains insurmountable. The flamethrower tanks look identical to regular Shermans until they fire, and by then, it's too late. Radio operator Corporal James Martinez, monitoring Japanese communications from an intelligence post near the beach, picks up frantic transmissions in broken code. New American weapon, impossible to counter. Liquid fire flows like water. Our positions become crematoriums. The translation confirms what Marine commanders are witnessing firsthand. The Japanese defensive doctrine, refined over centuries of warfare, is collapsing in the face of a weapon system created by Navy. Seabees working 20-hour days in a secret Hawaiian warehouse. Tank 431, its armor now scarred with fresh dents and burn marks from near misses, idles behind a destroyed Japanese pillbox as Sergeant Mesa surveys the transformed battlefield. Smoke rises from a dozen positions that had seemed impregnable that morning. Marine infantry moves forward in the wake of the flame tanks, advancing across ground that had cost hundreds of casualties just hours before. The revolution that 8 modified Sherman tanks initiated on February 20th spreads across Iwo Jima's volcanic landscape like the flames they project. By the third day of combat, Marine commanders have fundamentally altered their tactical doctrine. Infantry units no longer attempt frontal assaults on fortified positions. Instead, they hold positions and call for flame tank support, waiting for the mechanical crematoriums to clear bunkers that conventional weapons cannot touch. Lieutenant Colonel Justice Chambers, commanding the 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, watches through binoculars as Tank 434 approaches a complex of interconnected pillboxes that has pinned down his company for 6 hours. The tank moves with deliberate precision, its commander having learned through bitter experience that haste invites anti-tank fire from concealed positions. At 100 yards, the Sherman stops, its turret traversing methodically as the crew identifies targets through their periscopes. The first burst of flame strikes a machine gun port with surgical accuracy. Black smoke erupts from ventilation shafts 50 yards away, revealing the extent of the underground tunnel system connecting these positions. The second burst targets those ventilation shafts directly, pouring liquid fire into openings that Japanese engineers designed to provide fresh air and escape routes. Within minutes, Japanese soldiers begin emerging from positions across the complex, their hands raised in surrender or simply running in blind panic from the inferno consuming their fortress. Chambers reports to regimental headquarters, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and horror. Flame tank support is devastatingly effective. Enemy positions that resisted 3 days of conventional assault neutralized in under 10 minutes. Recommend immediate expansion of flame tank deployment. But the Lieutenant Colonel's report includes a troubling observation. The psychological effect on both sides is profound. Marines following flame tanks advance with grim efficiency, but several men have requested transfer away from flame-supported operations. The screams, one corporal explains, you can't unhear them. The Japanese response to flame tank tactics evolves with desperate creativity. General Kuribayashi issues detailed tactical bulletins based on observations from surviving defenders. Anti-tank teams receive new orders. Do not wait for flame tanks to close within conventional engagement range. Open fire at maximum distance with all available weapons. The goal is not necessarily to destroy the tank, but to damage external components, disable tracks, or force the crew to button up and lose visibility. Special assault teams practice new infiltration techniques. Rather than attacking tanks directly, they target supporting infantry. Without Marine riflemen providing security, flame tanks become vulnerable to close assault by determined defenders willing to sacrifice themselves. Some Japanese soldiers begin carrying buckets of sand, attempting to throw the abrasive volcanic ash into tank vision ports and ventilation systems. The tactic achieves limited success. Several tanks experience mechanical difficulties after sand infiltration damages engine components or clogs fuel systems. But Japanese countermeasures cannot overcome the fundamental tactical revolution that flame tanks represent. Sergeant Watanabe, still alive in his pillbox on day 4 of the battle, watches another Sherman approach. His position. His ammunition is nearly exhausted. His water supply ran out yesterday. The radio connects him to a command network that grows quieter each day as positions fall silent. He has accepted that death is inevitable, but the manner of that death terrifies him in ways that bullets and explosions never did. When the Sherman stops at 120 yards and its turret traverses toward his position, Watanabe makes a decision that violates every principle of his military training. He orders his 7 remaining men to evacuate through the rear tunnel before the flame reaches them. They will die fighting in the open rather than burn alive in their fortress. As they emerge from the pillbox's rear exit, Marine riflemen are waiting. The firefight lasts less than a minute. Watanabe takes 3 rounds through the chest and dies quickly, his final thought a prayer of gratitude that he did not burn. The tactical impact of flame tanks extends beyond individual engagements. Marine, intelligence officers, analyzing captured Japanese documents and interrogating prisoners, discover that enemy morale has collapsed in sectors where flame tanks operate regularly. A captured lieutenant's diary reveals the psychological devastation. "We are not fighting soldiers anymore," the entry reads. "We are fighting machines that bring hell itself. Our concrete fortresses offer no protection. Our tunnels become crematoriums. How can human courage defeat liquid fire?" Private First Class Eugene Sledge, serving with the 1st Marine Division, watches a flame tank demonstration during a lull in combat. The tank commander fires a ranging shot at a destroyed bunker 200 yards distant. The stream of napalm arcs through the air in a perfect parabola, striking the target and coating the concrete with burning gel that continues to burn for over a minute. Sledge writes in his journal that evening, describing his conflicted feelings about the weapon. "It's the most effective tool we have against Japanese fortifications," he notes. "But watching it work makes me question what we're becoming. The screams of burning men stay with you." Later, Sledge will describe the flamethrower as one of the most inhumane weapons of the war, a sentiment shared by many who witnessed its effects. Yet even critics acknowledge its necessity. Without flame tanks, Marine casualties would have been catastrophically higher. The moral calculus of warfare admits no easy answers. Tank 431's crew develops their own tactical innovations through trial and error. Corporal Carlson, the gunner, learns to read terrain features that indicate underground tunnel entrances. Slight depressions in the volcanic ash, unusual rock formations, areas where vegetation patterns change subtly. He targets these suspected tunnel entrances with short bursts of flame, forcing Japanese defenders to reveal their positions by either evacuating or suffocating, as fire consumes the oxygen in confined spaces. Private Morrison, the driver, masters the art of positioning the tank to minimize exposure to anti-tank fire while maximizing the flamethrower's effective coverage. He learns which types of volcanic rock provide stable firing platforms and which areas will cause the 35-ton Sherman to bog down in ash drifts that can swallow a tank to its hull. The crew operates with the precision of men who understand that a single mistake, a moment of inattention, could result in a 47mm shell penetrating their armor or a suicide bomber reaching their tank. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The logistical challenge of supporting 8 flame tanks across a battlefield, measuring 8 square miles taxes, Marine supply operations to their limits. Each tank consumes an average of 1,200 gallons of fuel mixture per day during heavy combat operations. The napalm must be mixed to precise specifications. Too thin, and it won't adhere to targets. Too thick, and it clogs the projection system. Supply sergeants establish dedicated refueling points behind the front lines, positioned to minimize the time flame tanks spend away from combat operations. Technical specialists from Colonel Unmarked's CB team remain on the island throughout the battle, conducting field repairs and modifications based on combat experience. They discover that volcanic ash infiltrates every mechanical system, requiring more frequent maintenance than anticipated. The pressurization system's seals deteriorate rapidly in the corrosive environment. The flame gun nozzles erode from repeated exposure to 1500-degree temperatures. One CB machinist fabricates replacement parts using salvaged materials, working through the night to keep tanks operational. By the battle's second week, patterns emerge in how Japanese defenders respond to flame tank attacks. Some positions surrender immediately when they identify a flamethrower approaching, their will to resist broken by witnessing previous attacks. Other positions fight with suicidal determination, knowing that surrender means burning alive or capture by an enemy they've been taught to fear more than death. The variability in response creates tactical complications for Marine commanders trying to predict Japanese behavior. Captain Frank Caldwell, commanding a rifle company in the 26th Marines, develops close coordination with flame tank crews assigned to support his sector. He learns to position his infantry to exploit the psychological shock that flame attacks create, advancing immediately behind the tanks to overrun positions while defenders are still reeling from the assault. His casualty rates drop by more than half compared to companies attacking without flame support. In post-battle reports, Caldwell will state unequivocally that flame tanks were the single most important supporting weapon at Iwo Jima. The human cost of operating flame tanks becomes apparent as the battle progresses. Tank 435 takes a direct hit from a 47mm anti-tank gun on day 8, penetrating the side armor and detonating inside the crew compartment. The explosion ignites the napalm fuel tanks, creating an inferno that kills all 5 crew members before they can evacuate. The burning tank continues to burn for 3 hours, the napalm feeding flames that reach temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Marines 50 yards away report feeling the heat through their uniforms. The loss devastates the small community of flame tank operators. They understood the risks intellectually, but witnessing the death of comrades in the very weapon they operate daily forces a psychological reckoning. Staff Sergeant Mesa gathers his crew that evening, his voice tight with emotion. What happened to 435 could happen to us any time. Every time we button up and advance, we're trusting our lives to 3 inches of steel plate and the hope that Japanese gunners miss their shot. But if we don't do this job, infantry Marines die by the hundreds, taking positions we could clear in minutes. The crew votes unanimously to continue operations. They will paint a small memorial on their turret, 5 stars representing the men lost from Tank 435, and they will make every shot count. Japanese defensive tactics continue evolving in response to flame tank effectiveness. Engineers begin constructing positions with multiple concealed exits, allowing defenders to evacuate before flame reaches them. Some bunkers feature water-filled barriers designed to cool or extinguish napalm streams. Others incorporate sharp angles and baffles in tunnel systems, preventing liquid fire from flowing into deep chambers where defenders shelter. But these adaptations require time and resources that Japanese forces no longer possess. American control of the air means construction activities draw immediate bombing runs. Naval gunfire interdicts supply routes, preventing the delivery of concrete and steel needed for improved fortifications. The remaining Japanese defenders must fight from positions designed before flame tanks existed, positions that have become death traps in this new form of warfare. Private Tanaka, still alive on day 14, has abandoned his suicide mission. The bomb remains strapped to his back, but he no longer believes the sacrifice will achieve anything meaningful. He has watched too many tanks shrug off anti-tank fire, seen too many desperate Japanese attacks fail against combined American firepower. His journal entries become increasingly philosophical, wrestling with questions about the nature of courage and the futility of resistance against overwhelming technological superiority. When American Marines finally overrun his position on day 18, Tanaka considers detonating the bomb in a final act of defiance. But exhaustion, dehydration, and a fundamental crisis of faith in the warrior code that defined his youth leave him unable to complete the act. He surrenders, becoming one of approximately 1,000 Japanese soldiers captured alive during the entire battle. His interrogation provides American intelligence with detailed information about Japanese perceptions of flame tank tactics. The Americans have defeated us not just with weapons, Tanaka tells his interrogator, but with imagination we could not match. The final statistics for flame tank operations at Iwo Jima reveal the weapon's decisive impact. 8 tanks, operating over 36 days of combat, destroy more than 1,000 fortified positions. They consume 360,000 gallons of napalm fuel, an average of 10,000 gallons per day. Marine casualties in sectors supported by flame tanks average 40% lower than sectors relying on conventional assault tactics. The psychological impact on Japanese defenders contributes to the first significant number of surrenders in any Pacific battle, with captured soldiers citing fear of burning as their primary motivation for abandoning positions. But the cost to tank crews and supporting personnel remains high. 2 of the 8 tanks are destroyed by enemy fire. 7 crew members are killed. Another 12 wounded seriously enough to require evacuation. Technical specialists conducting field maintenance suffer casualties from artillery and sniper fire. The psychological toll on survivors will manifest in coming decades as post-traumatic stress, nightmares, and moral injury that no amount of medals can heal. Tank 431 survives the battle, its armor scarred by dozens of impacts from anti-tank guns, small arms, and shrapnel. Staff Sergeant Mesa and his crew operate the tank until the final day of organized resistance, March 26, 1945. They fire their last shot at a bunker complex on Hill 362, watching black smoke pour from positions that have resisted 3 weeks of assault. When the smoke clears, white flags emerge from the tunnels. The mathematics of survival have finally overcome the warrior code, demanding death before dishonor. The broader implications of flame tank success at Iwo Jima reshape American military planning for the remainder of the Pacific War. The Marine Corps immediately requests 54 additional flamethrower tanks for future operations. Colonel Unmuck's team at Schofield Barracks, working with AAA Priority, the same level assigned to the Manhattan Project, develops the improved CBH-2 model. By June 1945, 70 new flame tanks are ready for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan that will never occur due to Japanese surrender after atomic bombings. The weapon that began as a last-minute improvisation becomes standard equipment throughout the Pacific. During the Battle of Okinawa, Army flame tanks consume 200,000 gallons of fuel mixture, proving equally effective against Japanese cave complexes on that island. The psychological impact on Japanese military planning is profound. Captured documents reveal that Japanese commanders on Okinawa modified defensive tactics specifically to counter flame tanks, dispersing forces to prevent concentrated targets and emphasizing mobile defense over static fortifications. General Kuribayashi's final assessment, transmitted just before his death in late March 1945, proves remarkably prescient. "The Americans have not defeated us with superior numbers or firepower alone," his message reads. "They have defeated us with superior imagination, turning our greatest strength, our underground fortifications, into death traps. Future wars will belong to nations that can imagine new forms of warfare, not those who perfect old ones." His prediction echoes through decades of military thinking, from precision-guided munitions to cyber warfare. Principle remains constant. Innovation triumphs over convention. Adaptation overcomes entrenchment. 40 years after that February morning, 2 old men stand together on Iwo Jima's black volcanic sand near where Tank 431 first opened fire. Former Staff Sergeant Robert Mesa, now 73 with trembling hands, faces former Sergeant Takashi Watanabe, who survived his evacuation from the pillbox and spent the remainder of the war in an American prison camp. "I hated you for 40 years, Watanabe says through an interpreter, his voice barely audible above the Pacific wind. "The flame tanks killed my friends in ways I cannot forget. But I understand now. War makes monsters of us all." Mesa responds simply, his own voice thick with emotion. "We were all just boys trying to survive. I'm glad we both lived to stand here today." The 2 warriors embrace as Mount Suribachi rises behind them, the volcanic peak where Marines raised the flag on February 23rd. The same week Tank 431 pioneered a new form of warfare. Their reconciliation represents more than personal healing. It acknowledges the transformation that 8 modified Sherman tanks created in military history, the moment when technological innovation overcame even the most fanatical human resistance. The Seabees who created these machines machinist's mate Riker and electrician's mate Kissel, returned to civilian life after the war. Their names appear only in obscure technical reports, forgotten except by military historians who study the evolution of armored warfare. Yet their innovation saved thousands of American lives, breaking the deadlock of what could have been a months-long siege and proving that imagination combined with technical skill can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Today, Tank 434, the sole survivor of those original 8 flame tanks, sits in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Its scarred armor tells the story of volcanic rock and shell impacts, of a weapon that changed warfare forever. The small plaque notes specifications and battle history, but cannot convey the sound of compressed nitrogen releasing, the sight of liquid fire arcing through Pacific mornings, or the screams of men dying in underground crematoriums. Veterans often pause longest before this exhibit, some saluting, others staring in silent remembrance. Schoolchildren ask their uncomfortable questions. Why would anyone create such a horrible weapon? The answer lies not in glorification of war, but in recognition of war's terrible necessities and the courage of young men who wielded these machines to save their brothers' lives. The flame tank represents humanity's endless capacity for both destruction and innovation. Our ability to imagine solutions to problems that seem unsolvable, even when those solutions carry moral costs that haunt survivors for decades. The last reunion of Iwo Jima flame tank veterans was held in 2015, attended by only 3 crew members, all in their 90s. They gathered at the museum, sharing memories with historians desperate to preserve first-hand accounts before they were lost forever. Staff Sergeant Mesa, confined to a wheelchair but mentally sharp, described the weight of responsibility that came with operating the flame tank. Every time we fired, he told the assembled historians, we knew we were burning men alive. We did it because the alternative was watching Marines die by the hundreds assaulting positions that conventional weapons couldn't touch. But knowing it was necessary doesn't make the memories easier to carry. Corporal Carlson, the gunner from Tank 431, testified about the psychological burden of his role. You could hear them screaming when the flame hit, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not for long, but you heard it. Sometimes at night, decades later, I still hear it. We did what we had to do, but I'll never forget smell. Burning flesh mixed with sulfur from the volcanic rock. That smell stays with you forever. His testimony provides unflinching acknowledgement of war's psychological costs, the way that necessary actions can inflict moral wounds that never fully heal. The technical evolution of flamethrower tanks continued after World War II, though the weapons never again achieved the decisive impact they demonstrated at Iwo Jima. During the Korean War, flame tanks saw limited use against fortified positions, but improved anti-tank weapons made them increasingly vulnerable. The Vietnam War marked the last major deployment of American flamethrower tanks, with M67 Zippos operating primarily in support of defensive perimeters rather than offensive operations. By 1974, the Marine Corps retired its last flame tanks, acknowledging that modern precision-guided munitions and thermobaric weapons could achieve similar effects with less risk to crew members. But the legacy of those 8 Sherman tanks modified in a Hawaiian warehouse persists in contemporary military thinking. The principle they demonstrated, that technological innovation can overcome defensive advantages, informs modern weapons development from bunker-busting bombs to drone warfare. The psychological impact of flame tanks, the way they broke Japanese defensive doctrine by exploiting the primal human fear of burning alive, prefigures modern psychological operations that seek to demoralize enemies through overwhelming technological superiority. The story of flame tanks at Iwo Jima also highlights an often overlooked aspect of American military success in World War II, not just the mass production of conventional weapons, but the creativity and adaptability of individuals like Colonel Unmacht and his CB team. Men who identified tactical problems, designed innovative solutions, and implemented those solutions rapidly enough to affect ongoing combat operations. This organizational culture of innovation, the ability to move from concept to battlefield deployment in months rather than years, represented as much of an advantage as numerical or industrial superiority. The Marine Corps learned crucial lessons about combined arms tactics from flame tank operations. The most effective deployments involved close coordination between armor, infantry, engineers, and fire support. Flame tanks could not operate effectively without infantry protection against close assault. Infantry could not advance safely without flame tanks neutralizing fortified positions. The integration of these elements, the systematic coordination that Japanese defenders found so devastating, became a foundational principle of modern American military doctrine. General Kuribayashi's observation about imagination defeating convention resonates beyond military applications. The flame tank represents a broader truth about human conflict and progress. Entrenched advantages, whether military fortifications or institutional inertia, eventually fall to creative solutions that reimagine fundamental assumptions. The Japanese defenders at Iwo Jima believed their underground fortress system provided insurmountable defensive advantages. They were correct within the existing framework of Pacific War tactics. But flame tanks changed that framework, rendering those defensive advantages obsolete through innovation that Japanese military planners had not anticipated or countered. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.